No, this is not the Cavs channel. This is the Browns channel, but I have my Cav Attack co-host Abby Mueller here with me. Ab, first time talking about the Browns with me on this channel. How you
It's an
feeling?
honor. It's a great honor to be on the Browns channel. Lots of Cavs talk, but always ready to talk about the Browns, even when we're pretty much, completely out of playoff contention. I think it's like a 0.3% chance at this point, or
Point
something
seven.
ridiculous.
Don't 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 don't
Point
don't
7.
don't missell
Sorry,
the point four
didn't
points.
mean to
We
slander them like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, we were 0.3 last week. We beat the Ravens, went to point 0.7. So like, hey,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Winning
Things
makes
are getting
progress.
crazy. It's heating up out here, but
1 week at a time. Got to
yeah,
go
or
1 and
it's
0.
freezing because it's going to be about 10 degrees in Cleveland this weekend. So it's going to be some interesting football. But look, we're always happy to talk about our team, even in the darkest times. We sat through 0-16, 1-15. This is nothing. We can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, we forget so fast how bad 0-16 was. Like we really do, because sometimes
Yeah.
we be talking like that was not that bad. And I remember, I have tried my whole life to not work during football games, but that one, oh no, I was taking shifts, man. I was
Yeah.
like, I'll catch up with this one on the replay. Sometimes it would be so obvious that we would lose that I'm like, I'll just watch the 14-minute highlight clips. Like,
Yeah.
that's how you know a season is kicking your butt. When it does that, it's like,
Yeah.
man, yeah, I don't even want to put myself through the drama of believing that they go win
Yeah.
this game.
There was one, I think it was the 0-16 season. Was 0-16 Deshaun Kaiser, or was that 1-15? I think
That
that
was
was 0.
0-16. Yeah, it was
I went
0-16.
to week 15 with my parents against the Ravens in the freezing cold. It just came up on my social media recently because it was, however many years ago now. And it was just like stuff coming up with like a video of a guy with a brown paper bag over his head. Like it was just a pathetic, embarrassing time. So I'm like, sometimes it's good to humble yourself and remind yourself we did have that at one point. So at least it's not that now. I mean, losing sucks and not being a playoff team sucks, but when 16 sucks more.
I have two in stadium memories of that era. I went to the one game they won because the tickets were like $2. It was Christmas Eve. The tickets were super cheap. And I was like, oh yeah, I can get lower bowl for like $10. I'm going, right? I was one of the idiots that went to the stadium when everybody was like, why would anybody go to the stadium? I'm like, yeah, I'm back from college. I'll go. I'll watch it. And then the Browns won that game, right? And that was cool. And we were doing the 0-16, the 1-15 parade or whatever we called it. And it was fun. And then I went to the first game in the 0-16 season. They played Pittsburgh. And I
Okay.
remember we got into the stadium. The vibes were great. We went on that giant escalator that takes you to the nosebleeds. And by the time we got up there, somebody was like, I guess there was a blocked punt and the Browns are down 7. And I was like,
Oh God,
oh, okay. Well,
nice.
this might be a long season. This might
That
be a
block
long season.
punt came to bite them in the playoff game where we started off the game with the bad
We
snap for
got it
Ben
back.
Roethlisberger.
It
So
took us three
karma
years. It took us
karma
3 years, but we
happens.
we
Yeah,
got
it
them
might
back.
take time.
But enough about the dark days. Let's talk about the brighter days ahead. One of the things that is interesting to watch. One, I think Miles has a defensive player of the year case is starting to become more and more legitimate if he gets, he's not playing against quarterbacks that are super mobile. So he has a legitimate case here if he can get a couple of extra sacks.
Yeah.
Obviously,
You
everything
mean
Deshaun
Andy
Watts.
Dalton isn't mobile? I feel like Andy Dalton is.
Yeah, I feel like Andy Dalton might not be mobile. And then you have Deshaun Watson, all the stuff going like with him about like what the offense could be going forward. Let's start there. When you watch the Browns with Watson, what are you seeing that's encouraging you, and what are you seeing that you're like, hey, you could probably get more if you had different personnel there?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about this a lot because the national narrative I feel like surrounding Deshaun Watson is that he's looked bad. And I think that comes from a perspective of like he's not putting up a lot of stats right now. That's just not happening. But I think for Browns fans and people who just watch the actual games, you're you're encouraged right now by what you're seeing from Deshaun Watson. One, because I think it's been an improvement each week. Like the Texans game pretty awful, like all around not good. Bengals, there were a lot of improvements. Obviously, we lost that game, but there were a multitude of factors, and we were also playing a team that has a lot more talent than us, honestly, at that point. But then I feel like last week was when he really looked his most comfortable he's looked so far, and I think that's what I was most impressed by was the confidence, especially in the cold weather, because I think that was a big conversation coming into this season was, is Deshaun going to be able to play in the cold weather? He originally said he didn't want to go cold weather city, and there were just some concerns about how he was going to look because he hasn't had a lot of experience doing that. And I thought he looked very calm, cool, collected, and was making some really great throws. Obviously, we still don't have the numbers to back that up, but the eye test is telling me that there are improvements being made, and I feel pretty good about it right now.
Yeah, and it's like if I had to gauge or kind of put what he's looked like, right? His comfort factor. I would say that first game, he looked like a rookie that you just put out there for the first time, and he was not comfortable in the offense, right? It looked like a new offense to him, a completely brand new offense that he had never run before. Most of the stuff that he did in preseason was procedural. It wasn't really about the offense. That was the first time he took real live reps, focusing on the live reps, focusing on the execution in that game, and it looked like it. That second game, it looked like, okay, I'm getting more comfortable, right? Like, he looked like he was more comfortable. And I think that was a tremendous leap from where he started. And then I think he took another big leap this week where it's like, oh, he was in command. And some of the stuff you could tell he was in command, that run he had on third down, right, where he got like 20 yards, where he just got to the top of his drop. He saw it was cover two, and was like, all right, I'm running. Like, no hesitation in that decision. Just goes straight downhill runs there. And then I thought another thing that showed his command was when he finally was like, Michael Woods, you got to get downfield. You know what I mean? When he's trying to dictate where guys go, that means like, okay, this is no longer an offense that I am a part of. This is my offense. I'm trying to tell you where to go so I can get you the ball in my offense. He was doing the no huddle stuff. I think the improvement he's made with his feet since he's gotten back from week 1 to 3, he looks like a different guy completely. And when I talk to other guys who have covered Deshaun, as a player and since like 2018, one of the things they said was that his first 3 games when he was a rookie, he was up and down. He looked a little bit shaky. But then like at some point in that third game, he got comfortable. And then that's when he had an explosion at the end of the year. Now, he's not going to have like a 5-touchdown game this week. If he does, I mean, I don't know how people are going to make that sound like it was a bad game. But, but he's probably not going to have that. But I think it's in the cards for him at some point, right? Like, he looks comfortable. It looked like he was running the offense well. He was making good decisions within the structure of the offense. One of the things I think people have not talked about in that game that was a positive thing for him was he not only played well, he not only looked comfortable, he did it versus one of the best defenses in the NFL in unfavorable conditions. Right. So not only was his defense really good, they had favorable conditions for a defense, which is cold, can't really throw it downhill, can't really move the ball like you want to, and you're kind of hamstrung to the run in that way. They were able to do that against one of the best defenses in football. And that, I think, bodes well for it going forward, where it's like, okay, I feel like personally, that's kind of the game Deshaun would have had if he hadn't sat out 700 games in that situation, right? Because when he played here in First Energy, he had a worse game in that situation where he had like the tsunami wins in 2020 when the Browns played the Texans. So to me, I'm like, look, it's not going to statistically look like he's back. And like, if you're making the documentary or whatever, it's like, that's not going to be the game where you cut it up and like, oh yeah, look, he's back. He had 163 yards. I understand that part of it. But if you watched him, it's like, okay, he was real comfortable. He knew what he was doing. He was commanding the offense. His body language was much better. He started doing some of the celebration stuff that he's known for doing when he gets like first. Like, he was really robotic the first couple of games, as if he was super uncomfortable. This is the first time I've seen him like look relaxed on the football field. Like, was like doing like, he did the scream at the end. I think that was like for him a big relief of pressure. Like, oh my God, finally. Like, I finally didn't feel like a different quarterback. I felt like myself here. And then, we talked about the press conference outfit, which was an interesting choice of clothing there for him. But that's only like you don't dress that way unless you're comfortable, right? And I think he's getting a lot of comfort. His post-game pressers, another indicator that he's comfortable because he's more elaborate in them, right? His first week back, when he got questions about the interception, he's like, I got to look at the tape. That's not normally what he does, right? If you followed him in Houston, he's like, yeah, the crosser came and then this guy buzzed. And then, like, he gives you those detailed answers. He started giving that versus Cincinnati, and he was real detailed this week about what happens. Like, it's an interesting mind exercise. His recall is really good when it comes to those things. So you can see him getting comfortable.
Yeah, I think the other reason that maybe Browns fans and people who closely watch the Browns are feeling so much more positive about what we've seen, especially last week from him, is that we spent so many years watching quarterbacks with such limitations that were very obvious to us. And to now even see a little flash of him escaping pressure or doing the little things that he can do that we have not seen, you're like, whoa, the potential just like shoots out at you right away. And I can't remember if it was Chubb or Njoku who said this in an interview recently. They were like, we also have to get used to playing with Deshaun, because I think they were operating under the assumption that they know their quarterback had limitations before. They knew Baker had limitations, and they play to those limitations. Same with Jacoby. I love Jacoby. I think he did a great job for us, but I think the players played understanding what his limitations were. And I think it was in the Texans game, there was one point that Nick Chubb kind of like stopped on a play where it probably felt like it was dead, because it would have been dead with maybe Jacoby or with Baker, but Deshaun somehow escaped and tried to make a throw, and the play didn't work out. But it was like maybe in a couple weeks when Nick Chubb is like, okay, I know this is what Deshaun can do, he's paying attention and waiting for that moment. So I think it's those little things that it's really coming together and making Browns fans feel good about what we're seeing.
Yeah, and it's like, for a dude like David, like his whole career has been like, hey, if the ball ain't out in like 4 seconds, the play's over. Right. So that's how he's learned how to play. Right. Whereas with Deshaun, it's like that ball could be live for like 7 seconds. You know what I mean?
Right.
He can really scramble, run around there, and then make a crossbody throw. He said in his press conference, he feels like he could do some of the stuff that Mahomes can do. And I hope he's right about that. Right.
I know. That's like the future goal I see, because I see like Travis Kelce and Mahomes. I'm like, if Njoku and Deshaun Watson could be that, that would be everything.
And in part of that, though, a lot of what makes them great is that they have such a keen understanding of each other that, like, sometimes Travis like will break the rules of the scramble drill, right? Because the rules are, you just got to follow, cut, get shorter if you're deep, get deeper if you're short. But sometimes Travis will do the opposite, and Pat will anticipate it, and he'll just get him the ball there, right? I think that was part of why he was upset with Michael Woods. He's like, hey, man, the play is still alive. You can't be just hanging out here in the flat. Like, get to a spot in the zone, right? That's what I think people thought he wanted to adjust on the fly. I think he's saying, like, hey, your route's done. You can't just stand there and just think like I'm going to sit there and wait to throw the ball to you. If you see me moving around, get to a spot. Like, don't worry about where I'm at. I'll get there wherever the spot I need to get you the ball. I'll get there, get to a spot so I can get you the ball, right? That's what he wanted. He wanted him to get to a spot, and I think that's going to be an adjustment, right? Because with Baker, you got to get to Baker so he can get you the ball, because he's not a super athlete. With Jacoby Brissett, I love Jacoby. His feet are great, and he has quick feet. I call him slow Cam Newton, because he has Cam Newton's feet, but like none of the long speed. And it's like, with Jacoby, he's going to get tracked down. He runs a 5 flat 40. And that was when he was in college and lighter and younger and didn't have as many injuries. So he probably don't even run that no more, right? You need to get to Jacoby, right? You need to follow those scramble drill rules for exactly what they are. With Deshaun, it's like, get to a spot. You know what I mean? I will. When I watch Bryce Young, I see the same thing that I see with Deshaun, where it's like, Bryce will find somebody no matter where they are on the field. Like, no matter what happens to him, he's able to orient himself again and just find somebody. Like, it never seems like he loses track of where anybody is on the football field. And I think that's a skill that Deshaun has. But right now, everybody's used to, he's running, let's go to him. Or he's going downfield. And it's not that with Deshaun. It's, hey, get to a spot. You know what I mean? Second play, basically, right? Okay, you ran your route. That's where it was. Cool. That's over. All right, get to a spot. Where are they in? Okay, they're in quarters. I know I could be right here. You know what I mean? I think that's going to take
Yep.
a little bit of an adjustment. That's something that you can't really practice around unless you're around it, right? And I don't think any of the wide receivers, like if I go back through even their college history, they ever played with a quarterback like that because those guys are just rare, right? Amari Cooper, Blake Sims in college, like very much not Pat Mahomes, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like maybe like Dak Prescott, not that kind of guy. Derek Carr, not that kind of guy. David Njoku, don't even know who he played with in college. We know who he played with in the pros. And then
Right.
DPJ with Shea Patterson ain't gonna get you ready for that, right?
Nope.
Like a lot of these guys have really only played with a certain level of quarterback. And when you're playing with a different level of quarterback, it's going to be a lot of adjustments there. What kind of player, like, do you feel like they need to add like a specific type of player at wide receiver or a specific archetype of player at wide receiver or tight end to kind of get this thing to the next level?
Yeah, it's interesting because just thinking about our wide receiver room as a whole right now, like obviously Amari and DPJ have both been pretty great. Like DPJ has exceeded all expectations. Amari has been honestly more than what I thought he could be. Like I knew he would be a wide receiver one, but it's been pretty impressive. Other than that, it's like a very young room. So a lot of it is kind of what you were talking about is building that relationship, Deshaun, where you don't even you have to even say anything, where you have that instinctual connection where you're like, oh, I feel like you're going to do this here. And it's interesting. I feel like Aaron Rodgers used to talk about that with Devontae Adams a lot, where they had this unspoken kind of connection where he just knew what, like they knew what each other was thinking at all times. And so I feel like that's going to be a lot of it, would just take time. You can't have that happen overnight. At the same time, though, I do think we need to get another receiver, whether it is free agency or the draft. I still don't know. Obviously, we don't have any majorly high draft picks for the next couple of years to make, but you can find hidden gems in there. So it'll be interesting to see what we do. I just don't think there's a lot of like big free agency wide receivers out there that are going to be in this next cycle. So I don't know what kind of moves they're looking to make.
You know, sometimes the reason I like doing these collaborations and like talking through these things because it gets new ideas to pop in my head. And I don't love the idea that just popped into my head,
Oh, no.
but I think it will work. I really do.
I'm
Rashard
scared.
Higgins would be eaten on this team right now. Like I'm dead serious.
We're gonna say
Rashard Higgins, because look at everything I said. The reason he's really good with DPJ is DPJ does the Rashard Higgins stuff, but he's just better than Rashard Higgins.
Yeah.
But like the slow route runner that can like anticipate a ball really well. And then the one thing Rashard Higgins did well was get to a spot, right? Rashard Higgins, sometimes he won't even run his route. He will just abandon the play. Kevin Stefanski will never have Rashard Higgins back. Like, I'm just going to throw that out there right now. He's not coming back. He's not coming back. Kevin's not going to, that is not what Kevin stands for. But if Rashard were in the game and it was a scramble drill, this is what Rashard does, right? Like I'm going to get to this spot right here and catch this ball. Like I feel like Rashard Higgins would be having one of those seasons that he's had plenty in Cleveland where he does absolutely nothing for 12 weeks and it just goes off for 6 weeks and everybody's talking about, is he going to make a leap to be wide receiver number 2? Like, if he were, I bet he's looking at home because he knows how his game is and he's watching this and he's like, and if that was Rashad Higgins in the game instead of Mike Woods, and I think Mike Woods is probably going to become a better receiver than Rashad Higgins, so I'm not saying like he's bad, but if that were Rashad Higgins in that game, oh, I bet you money Rashad would have been like, yeah, I'm going to the end zone, find a way to get it to me, because he used to do it to Baker all the time. He's like, hey Baker, I don't care how you got to get it here, baby, I'm open. Like, you know what I mean? But that works with Deshaun, right? Like, but and that's a thought that I had in my head. I'm like, yeah, Rashard Higgins, oddly enough, finds a way.
But like you said, Kevin's just not gonna.
Kevin will never. Him and AVP were done with him, right? Because it was like he would not run his route sometimes, right? Like he would just freestyle, and like he's not freestyle good. Like, you know, like we can say if Odell freestyled or not. Who I also think Odell, if he was healthy, would probably be having a great year right now. But you know, but that's a whole different argument. I'm not gonna rehash here. But I feel like, you know, if the Kevin doesn't want him to freestyle, and like it's one thing to freestyle when you're like Odell, it's another thing to freestyle when you are Rashard Higgins, which means you don't get that freedom, big dog.
Well, he was also a healthy scratch quite a few times where you're like, yeah, there were just some issues there that we probably don't even know about and would probably hold them back from wanting Rashard Higgins.
Oh, because Rashard Higgins' thing was, I'm gonna get to this spot. I'm not running the route sometimes, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna get open, right? Like that. There's some wide receivers who run routes and get open. There's some guys who just get open. Rashard's one of those dudes who's gonna get open, and then I mean, you could be one of those dudes, but also, he was one of those dudes that will let you know he was open. It's like Rashard,
Yeah.
dog, you didn't run the route.
Yeah.
Like that's why you didn't get the ball, right? Like
Yeah.
Rashard would only be useful in scramble drill situations, right? Because everything else is very timing related with what Deshaun likes to do. But there will be those times where he will have 40 yards
Yeah.
off one reception because he was just right at the spot that he needed to be, right? Like that is the weird thing with the dude like Rashad. I think you could find a different guy like that. I think maybe get you a 50-50 ball guy, like one of those, maybe a athletic tight end, maybe a bigger wide receiver, a hybrid of both, because I think if you take that pressure off Njoku in the seam and you allow him to get some one-on-one opportunities with some linebackers, you can get some accurate balls to him there, or you can get a couple fade balls because Deshaun really likes throwing those front pylon fades. You need a bigger body, though. Like, Coop's not the kind of athlete that'll get it. Like, maybe an Alden Tate is somebody you can get cheap. That'd be a 50-50 ball guy, right? So I think there's something like that they can go there. Let's talk about Myles Garrett real quick, who, it's funny. We go through this roller coaster with Myles every year where, there are people telling us Myles is not doing enough. And we look up in December and you're like, oh, he has 13 sacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's had 13 sacks. He has had double-digit sacks every year of his career except for his rookie year. And that includes the season in which he only played 10 games. Like, he's been to the Pro Bowl 4 straight times. Would be 5 if he never does the helmet thing to Mason Rudolph. He is clearly one of the best players in his generation right now.
Yes.
Myles has an opportunity to get Defensive Player of the Year. What do you feel like he has to do to get it this year, given that the defense stinks?
First of all, it's so funny because I have been fighting with people about Myles all year. Like a couple weeks ago, I was having a conversation with someone before the last few weeks where he's kind of had a couple more sacks, and they were like, he's not doing anything this year. And I'm like, well, first of all, he is. Like, just because he has like 1 sack a game, like that's good. Getting a sack in a game is big. Like that, it doesn't just happen easily all the time. And secondly, like he contributes in so many other ways in terms of creating pressure. Like quarterbacks have to throw the ball so quickly when they know Myles Garrett is running straight at them. So he is affecting the game in other ways. So it's funny that like we're at this point now, because I feel like I've just been fighting and fighting for weeks about this conversation. In terms of Defensive Player of the Year, though, I do think in a lot of ways it is a statistical award. Like they do want to see you put up some of the best numbers in the league, which it makes sense because you're comparing, players on different teams. There's so many variables there. You want to see like, are you getting to the quarterback more than everyone else? So a couple more sacks in these last games, which might not be too hard considering, like we said, Andy Dalton's on the other side in this next one. Could see that happen there. I think he would have a really good case for making it. Also, just remembering that he was in a car accident this season and has been able to fight through that and continue to play at the level he has is like, I think that deserves the award in itself just for doing that.
I want Myles Garrett to somehow get the sack record in Pittsburgh. Give it that.
Oh, that would be so cool.
If he can find a way to get 10 sacks in 3 games, it's ridiculous. But if he can find a way to get 10 in 3, you know what I mean? He can do it.
Justin Fields like 4 times last season. Like, I don't know. He could have those games here.
Well, if Baker Mayfield can give TJ Watt 4.5 in a game, like I feel like it's possible for Mason Rudolph or Pickens to do it, right?
Yeah.
But he could solidify his Defensive Player of the Year argument in Pittsburgh. I mean, that would almost be as good as a playoff game, honestly. Like having that in Pittsburgh. Oh, chef's kiss. You know what I mean? So it would be something interesting there. It's interesting. We always go through this with Myles, and like the thing with Myles too is it's the same thing with Joe Thomas when he was here. They're the most impactful player on the defense or offense before they even do anything. Because the whole game plan is how to get around that player, right?
Yes.
Like once you reach that level, like it's like with the shutdown corner, right? The Darrell, like we understand this with some positions, but we don't with others. Darrelle Revis wasn't like, oh, he's not getting any picks. Oh yeah, because they're not throwing to him. They're deciding strategically to avoid him the whole game, and that means he's having a massive impact. It's the same thing for Myles Garrett, right? Like they are deciding to avoid throwing the ball deep. They are deciding to avoid doing anything more than a 3-step drop the whole game because Myles Garrett's on the other side. Like they're not going to go under center and take a 5 or 7-step drop. They are going to be real hesitant about taking a 7-step drop if Myles is out there without chipping him, which means that they're going to lose a route or that route's going to be late and easier to pick up for a linebacker. Like there is so much that he affects without having to get a sack, without having to get a pressure that I feel like we should understand because we understand it with other positions, right? We don't do this with corners. We don't do this with other spots, right? Like we're like, oh, okay, if Randy Moss in his peak years, so maybe we're judgmental about, oh, he has to have a bunch of yards. But if he's having good numbers, not great numbers because he's getting double covered, we say he's getting double covered. We don't do that with like defensive ends in general. And it's weird. But I think Myles, I mean, like I made the argument that if he has like another year like this and he finishes this year strong, he's probably a Hall of Fame lock. Some people agreed, some people disagreed with that. Right. But I think the argument is there. If he's at like 85 sacks and like by the time he's 28, he's going to get to 100, by the time he's probably going to get to 100 that season too. So it's like, it's been a phenomenal career for him so far. And there's still like so much left for him to get. One thing.
Did you see someone asked him about that today in the media? Someone was like, do you think you've had a Hall of Fame career? And he was like, not yet, probably. What is he supposed to say, though? I don't know. I feel like that's a very intense question to ask. Like, are you a Hall of Famer?
Well, and the thing is, too,
like
it's like people don't understand, like, you kind of get in the Hall of Fame off like the strength of 2-3 years. You know what I mean? Like, everything else is like adds to your cumulative argument. But like, Dan Marino had some like 2-3 great seasons, and he had good seasons after that, but he got in the Hall of Fame off the strength of 2 or 3 great seasons, right? That's why I say Joe Burrow's like one more hot finish away from like probably being a Hall of Famer if he just finishes the rest of his career out as a good quarterback, right? Same thing happened with Drew Brees. I'm not even going to throw Tom Brady in there, but we know Tom Brady really only had like 2-3 hot seasons.
A lot of quarterbacks, though. I feel like mostly quarterbacks have that argument. Not as much like Myles Garrett type players and
quarterbacks kind of work like music, like artists. You know what I mean? Like some guys get in the Hall of Fame off the strength of an album. You know what I mean? Yeah. They could drop a bunch of just like regular albums after that. That's not what people aren't going to remember. Whatever Michael Jackson was dropping in like 2008.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But
don't even listen to it.
But he dropped Thriller. He dropped his self-title. And he dropped a Bad. So. Hall of Fame, you know what I mean? Like the argument was written. Everything else was just extra, right? It's same thing with LeBron after that 4th ring in Cleveland, right? 2016. Didn't matter. Like anything after that, it doesn't matter. But that's been this conversation. If you want to check out more of me and Ab talking about sports in general, we have a show on the Cavs Burner. Make sure you click it. Links are in the description down below. If you want more of Ab specifically, she has a bunch of great stuff that you can check out. She has an article on SI that she does, that she keeps up with. She also has a podcast, Just a Girl from Cleveland, on all available formats that podcasts are available on. Follow her on Twitter at Abby_Mueller_. All of the links are down there. Make sure you guys check it out. Ab, anything you guys say before we head out?
I think you covered it all. Just looking forward to the future of the Cleveland Browns, as we always are. We're never living in the present, always looking to the future.
Yeah, and people joking like, "Oh, we down on this team." Where the motivation's not there. Let them finish 5-1 and watch. Yeah. Let them finish 9-8 and watch. Watch us ramp up the Super Bowl or bust, right? Like, people are kidding themselves when they say, "Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter." It does, because if they finish 3-3, you're gonna be mad for the whole offseason. If they finish 5-1, you about to be in everybody else's Twitter spaces talking an egregious amount of junk. Yes. You know what I mean?
Winning record, 9-8. Did you see that? Winning record.
The whole record not even gonna matter. 5-1 with Watson though. That's all it's gonna be, right? Like that's all it's gonna be. That's all it's gonna be, right? So. And it matters to free agents too. I've brought up this point where it's like, hey, they're gonna care about that record, but we can go on all day about talking junk and all of that. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching. You, Brian, have a great day. Have an even better night.